Hello everyone, TLSG here, back again with another daily Marvel Snap video. So today we have kind of a spicy one. It's one that we all know Red Skull is in a really good spot right now. A zero Red Skull deck is really, really strong. But this take on it has felt the most consistent. It has felt to me, the strongest of the ones that I've ran. And we found this deck list from another snapper named Safety Blade. He posted this on his Twitter as well as a few tips on how to navigate it. And he's consistently sharing really strong, really powerful decks that operate pretty well. And so if you guys are ever wanting to look at a few different decks and you're on Twitter, make sure to give him a follow. He's always sharing a variety of different decks, including ones for the featured location, similar to the videos that I post. But his are deck lists that are concise. He gives a few tips, and honestly, I think they're very helpful. And so if you are curious, his Twitter link will be in the description below. Make sure to check it out if you're interested. But as far as today's list, we have a deck list that I titled Zero the Hero. Zero in this deck list has a lot of targets. But even if for some reason we don't drop Zero, we have so many different kind of paths to a high power play that it's almost like we're never waiting on a particular draw line. We have enough low cost cards that we always have something to do early. And then we have enough combos for the late game that we always have some really solid combo piece, whether that be flooding our hand on turn 5 and 6 so that Dracula can draw into our Red Skull or our Xayvius, or maybe it's something a little bit different where we kind of hold some of our cards, we drop our Typhoid Mary, we stack a Lizard, we drop an Enchantress. There's a lot of combo plays with this deck that I think complement each other really, really well. And so let's run through the deck list really quickly. First up, we have Sunspot. This is going to be a good early curve card. If it gets destroyed with a Killmonger, that's fine. It's not our make or break card, but it is nice whenever we end up going the path of Dracula and we end up flooding our cards onto the board and we end up having 3 or 4 energy left over. Sometimes our Sunspot can get up to 6-8 power and be a pretty impactful lane component while we're still pushing power elsewhere. And then we have Nightcrawler. Nightcrawler is one of 3 cards in this list that allow us to drop our Ebony Maw early and not have to worry quite as much about the power that's available in that lane. Nightcrawler is going to be able to be dropped into a lane and then moved out of that lane into another one. Ideally, this is done in an Angela lane, but even if not, we can always push this 2 power into a hard to reach location. We can push this 2 power into our Ebony Maw lane to give it just a little bit of an extra kick, and it's just overall a fairly flexible play. And then we have the hero himself. We have Zero. Zero in this list has a lot of targets. He can target the Ebony Maw. He can target the Lizard so that you don't have the negative ongoing effect of it reducing by 3 power. He can target your Typhoid Mary, and he can target your Red Skull, all of which are going to be really strong targets. And in a lot of lists, a lot of times you kind of shy away from using him versus some of the lower powered cards because of the long-term kind of power potential that it makes a little bit more difficult in the long run. But with this list, I honestly don't mind dropping Zero with our Ebony Maw so that we can continue pushing power in the lane, or even sometimes Zero with a Lizard so that we don't get the downside of that and we have a strong 2-cost card on the board. Because then we can always do our Typhoid Mary or our Red Skull partnered with an Enchantress, and then if we have Dracula as well, that can pull into one of the other ones. It just gives us a lot of flexibility and play around potential. And then we have Ebony Maw. We're not going to be able to play this card after turn 3, and he has the ongoing ability, you can't play cards here. And so if you drop Zero before you drop this card, you're going to be able to continue to play cards in this location. He is a 1-cost 7-power card, which is an insane stat line for a 1-cost, especially if you can still kind of maneuver that lane and get additional power as well. And so this combined with Zero is going to be good, or he's going to be good with one of our other cards that are coming up soon. Next up, we have Angela. Angela is the queen of tempo. The amount of power that she can push so easily and into the late game is absolutely insane. By having a low cost curve and filling this up most of the way, maybe we put 1 or 2 cards in that lane, maybe we just leave 1 slot left that's open, we can push this to 5, 7, even 9 power, which for a 2-cost card is insane. And then we have Cloak. Cloak is going to allow us to move our Ebony Maw into a lane that has more established power. That way we can push additional power into the lane that Ebony Maw was in. And so if we end up dropping Ebony Maw on 1, 2, or 3, and then we drop Cloak on 3 or 4, or whatever turn we drop him in, we can then push additional power into that lane as well as pulling our Ebony Maw over. That way we can kind of consolidate our resources and make for a really strong push in that lane. And then we can finish off the game with something like a Red Skull, a Dracula, a Xayvius to find a win condition in a secondary lane while stacking all of our big power pushes in that first one. And then we have Lizard. Lizard has the ongoing ability -3 power if your opponent has 4 cards here. We can use this as a way to bait the opponent into playing and capping out a location, or we can use 0 with this. We can use Enchantress on this a little bit later. This just gives us quite a bit of flexibility, and with this deck list and how many options it has to enable a 5-power Lizard instead of a 2-power Lizard, he feels really, really strong. And then we have Dracula, something that whenever I saw it, it just kind of clicked. It made sense. In this list, a lot of times you run Venom as a way to kind of consolidate and get rid of the negative downside of your cards. Instead of Venom, we are running Dracula. Dracula gives us a little bit more flexibility in that we don't have to play our Red Skull, we don't have to play our Typhoid Mary. We can throw Dracula onto the board and then get rid of the majority of our cards. Most of the time, the lowest low roll that he's going to pull into is an Ebony Maw. And then the highest will be, of course, the Red Skull, which at that point doesn't have the downside of Red Skull's ability. And so this seems like in a very efficient way to allow yourself to pull into that big power without having to consolidate it and making yourself a Shang-Chi target in the process. And then we have Enchantress. Enchantress is going to let us cancel out our ongoing abilities. So if we play a Typhoid Mary, sometimes we're going to need to cancel that ability out. If we play a Red Skull, sometimes we need to cancel that ability out. And then at the same time, there are a lot of really strong ongoing decks right now that are pretty greedy. They stack their cards into one particular lane. So Patriot decks, Cerebro decks, Omega Red decks all have to operate on having their ongoing abilities, or else they just fall incredibly short. And so Enchantress can be held strategically until the end of the turn, and then we can drop it to cancel out all of those abilities and give ourselves the advantage. And then we have Typhoid Mary. Typhoid Mary has the negative ongoing effect of your other cards have -1 power. So this is a pretty bad ongoing ability to have, but we have so many ways that we can either play this and cancel it out. We can do 0 and then play her naturally without the ongoing ability. We can let this get absorbed by Dracula. There's a lot of ways that we can make usage of Typhoid Mary in this list. And then we have Red Skull. Red Skull has the ongoing ability. Enemy cards at this location have +2 power. So this is a really bad ongoing ability to have as well. If they cap out and have the maximum impact from this, you're giving them 8 power compared to your 15, so you're still getting a 7 power swing, but it's just not quite as impactful as a 15 power swing. And so being able to cancel this out with a 0 either on turn 5 or turn 6 can make for a massive swing. And then, of course, as I've said several times, Dracula can discard this card and absorb that big power push. And then finally, we have America Chavez. America Chavez is going to let us more consistently draw into our other cards, and it gives us the bonus of being able to reliably know if our Dracula can discard into a decently powered card. If we can discard the rest of our cards and maybe we drop Dracula on turn 4, we know that we can push whatever card we get on 5, and knowing that Chavez is a way to get a discard in on 6. So maybe we have a Red Skull and an Enchantress, and we know that we're drawing into our Chavez. We can drop Red Skull on 5, we can drop Enchantress on 6, while still getting the power from Chavez onto the board. And so just a lot of flexibility that this card enables, and the Dracula combo enables as well. Plus, with this, we're going to draw into our other pieces a little bit more consistently, so we're going to be able to have that early game pressure much more consistently than if we had a 6-cost card, a 5-cost card, and a 4-cost card in our starting hand. And so yes, that can still happen, but just not nearly as often as it would have otherwise. But that is the rundown of the deck list. We are going to go ahead and jump into a couple of games. I hope you guys enjoy. All right, so first up we have Spreer. Next up we have Spreer. The first location is Dark Dimension, which is phenomenal for us. That means we can hide our Ebony Maw without having to worry about doing a 0 on it, and we get quite a bit of upside from it. Now we can do our Sunspot into Isle of Silence. We could potentially, actually, let's go ahead and drop a Lizard there. That cancels out the ongoing ability. That's phenomenal. He's all of a sudden a 2-cost 5-power card without any potential downside. Awful. Straight awful. Okay, well. It's gonna happen sometimes, I suppose. Let's throw down a Sunspot. I don't know that we do our Angela, a 7-power card, compared to us being able to do like a 4, like a 10, and then a 15, and then an Enchantress. I don't know. I don't know that we leave room for the Angela, but I do think we leave room for quite a few cards. We're going to go Lockjaw rotation on the world ship. Very, very bold. Okay. That's not how you want to start out the video, but that is what we're doing. Let's jump into the next one. See if we can have a little bit more traditional of a game rather than world ship. All right, so next up we have Kindaren. We do have Zero, we have Nightcrawler, we have Cloak, so we have some movement capabilities, some canceling out capabilities. We also have Angela, so I'm going to wait to drop anything until we drop the Angela. That way we can buff her up a significant amount. And then Bifrost is our middle location. I think we're going to play Angela into Camartage, knowing that she will eventually move over into with the Bifrost, just in case this is something less advantageous, like, I don't know, Fisk Tower. So let's avoid playing something in the Bifrost for now. They're going to double down on the Mr. Sinister duplication. Interesting. And so maybe they're running a Patriot deck, which if they are, we have an Enchantress to deal with that. So I think we could be okay there. I think this turn we just play our Nightcrawler. Next turn we can probably play our Cloak, and then that will move these cards over and we can move them back into the Camartage lane. And they end up snapping. I'm not 100% sure why. We're going to snap back. We do feel pretty confident with what we have. We're going to go ahead and lock this in. We're going to lock in the Nightcrawler, and we're just going to kind of play it as is. They could be playing maybe a Cerebro 2 instead of a Patriot, but either way, both of those rely on a strong ongoing ability. And so they do have the Patriot. Now we could lock this down. We could cancel it out with we could cancel it out with Enchantress now, but I think we wait just a moment. I think we capitalize on buffing up our Angela by doing a Cloak and then a Zero. That is going to move these cards over, and then we're going to have the opportunity to move them back. Plus, the first card we play next turn is going to have its ability canceled out, so Red Skull will be able to be played onto the board naturally. And then we still have the freedom to move these cards around. We should have quite a bit of flexibility as a result. And so let's go ahead and lock this one in. We can play Red Skull into the Avengers compound next turn, and they do end up stacking a Patriot and a Mystique together. And so they're really heavily leaning in on the fact that we're not going to have Enchantress, but we do. It's one of those decks that is really strong, unless. And so those decks are always hard for me to navigate because sometimes in a small sample size, they may do great. Then if people kind of pivot and they start running Enchantress instead, it's incredibly difficult to navigate at that point. And so I think what we're going to do, let's go ahead and play our zeroed out Red Skull. We can move our... So if the Patriot buff goes away, this is just a 2, 4, 6, 8 power lane. We need about 10 power here total, I would say, to be able to have a decent push. So let's move some of these cards out. We can always move Nightcrawler outside of the Cloak because he does still have his ability to move once. So I think we leave it as is until we figure out if maybe they're going to run maybe they're going to run a Blue Marvel. Maybe they're going to run something else that buffs these up just a little bit. So I think we spread our power just a little bit, knowing that we have a Sunspot and an Enchantress to finish out the final turn. We don't want to drop Enchantress this turn because they might move their Patriot or their Mystique. And so we don't want that to happen. Or if it does, we don't want to have the wrong counterplay in place. And so it does look like they did move their Patriot and Enchantress. So maybe they have a, I don't know, maybe they have a Dr. Doom that's going to send Doombots across the board. Honestly, that's okay. We are currently winning this lane even with the Patriot buff. So once that goes away, that's pretty big. We can do Enchantress, we can do Sunspot, that will buff this up by 2. This will be a 2 power, so it's an extra 4 power push in this lane, which I think is going to be enough. I don't think there's much wiggle room in this game, honestly, no matter what they drop this turn. So let's go ahead and rip the Band-Aid off. Let's lock this in. Let's see what they end up dropping. We have the Enchantress to cancel out the Mystique's ability. And then we will see what the other 2 drops they drop are. So it's the Onslaught to try to duplicate their big powerful bonus. And so it's one of those that it's an all or nothing deck. If your opponent has Enchantress and you're not able to anticipate it, the majority of your power push is all of a sudden gone. And so let's go ahead and skip over into the next one. That's an 8-cube game, up and down. Let's jump over into the next one and see if we can keep it going. All right, so next up we have Pixel Oink, and in our starting hand we do have our Maw, but we also have Cloak, so we're going to be able to play Cloak and reposition some. We're going to be able to reposition the Ebony Maw so that we can drop additional power in that lane later. But I think to start off, we're going to do our Sunspot into the far right lane. We don't know what it's going to turn out to be. We can't play into Crimson Cosmos, but we might as well push our power a little bit where we can. And then Mindscape is not a great one. Because we're going to switch hands, we can't control what our Dracula could potentially pull into. And so it's not ideal. I think we go ahead and play Ebony Maw into this far right lane. That's going to be hard for them to come up over in power, no matter what they drop there. So maybe we move it out at some point. Maybe we leave it where it's at and just consider it a done deal. We are going to shuffle. We are going to shuffle our cards into our hand after this turn. So I think what we want to do, we can do Cloak and we can do Zero. That makes it where if we draw into a Lizard or a Typhoid Mary next turn, we can drop it without worries of any kind of negative downside or negative repercussions. And then if we don't, then maybe we just skip next turn, let Sunspot absorb some energy, and then we drop something like a Red Skull on that final, or on the 5th turn. So they drop a Bishop. That's going to allow them to gain quite a bit of power over the course of the game. And we do draw into our Typhoid Mary, which is really big. I think what we want to do is we zero out Typhoid Mary. We go ahead and move our Ebony Maw over into Mindscape. Let's snap on them. On turn 5, we can do a Red Skull. On turn 6, they can do Enchantress, but we don't have anything that we're like really heavily leaning on. And so we can do Red Skull here on 5. That's going to leave them with maybe one card that they can drop here because of the limitation of Crimson Cosmos. That I think it's going to be pretty easy to sneak this one away if we can sneak this one as well. And so let's go ahead and lock in the Typhoid Mary. That's going to be a really big Mindscape lane. It's going to be difficult for them to overcome. Having 24 power is better than some decks can do in game. And so we'll see. We'll see how it rolls overall, but they do have a little bit of a movement component with their Human Torch and Iron Fist. So maybe they're running a bounce deck, but they can't bounce these cards back into their hand after this. Interesting. Let's go ahead and do Red Skull into the Crimson Cosmos. That should give us a pretty substantial lead. We have a pretty substantial lead in Mindscape. And then we're going to switch hands. We're sending them an Enchantress, a Nightcrawler, and a Dracula, all of which are just okay. They're not huge. So they're not anything like an Iron Man or an inverted White Tiger or anything crazy. And so let's do our Red Skull. They drop a Collector. So I think when we switch hands, that their Collector will get buffed up by 3, right? Does it count as being drawn? No, it doesn't, but that's fine. And so we know that we didn't send them anything that's strong enough to win this lane. And honestly, even a Shang-Chi wouldn't quite do it. It would take us down to 14. That would only bring them up to 10. Let's just go ahead and drop Chavez in the far left lane and easy peasy, done deal. They do end up retreating. They realize that they don't have a win condition. Ideally, we would have been able to do this a little bit more sneakily on that final turn. That way we could sneak out 4 cubes instead of 2, but nonetheless, we were able to capitalize and make it a win condition. Let's go ahead and jump over into the next one. All right, so next up we have Frozen Pyro. And in our starting hand, we have our Ebony Maw, but we don't have anything to necessarily enable it further from that point. So I think we might hold it one turn. We don't really have anything for the 3-cost slot, and so that's always a little bit open for potentially dropping Ebony Maw on 3. Weird World is never a location that is smiled upon. It's not one that I just enjoy getting, but we did draw a Red Skull from them, so that means they're running a similar deck to what we are. We're going to be able to do a Red Skull here and most likely take the Monster Metropolis bonus. We can hit that with an Enchantress to make sure they don't get any upside from it. I think we'll be okay. I think overall we're going to be okay. They drop a 0 into what, a Lizard? No, a 0 into an Ebony Maw. They are running a very similar deck list. Interesting. Okay, and then Hala comes down. We have a Cosmo. Very, very interesting. We are going to be able to beat 7 power over the course of the game, and so I don't think we necessarily stress about that. Maybe we throw Ebony Maw into Hala. Just throw it out there. At 7 power, they're going to have to invest a decent amount to potentially win over here. And maybe we sneak away a card destruction here and there, but we don't. So they drop a Cloak. moving our Ebony Maw over is not going to be great. Or they drop our cloak, I guess. And our 0. And so moving cards over into this lane isn't going to be fantastic for us. Although we could drop our Enchantress and cancel it out. I think maybe we just stack it. Maybe we stack it, we do a Typhoid Mary over here, we do a Red Skull over here, and then we kind of figure out that last turn play. Or no, we would do this, we would do a Red Skull here, and then we figure out the last turn play after that. Let's go ahead and go with that play line. Depending on what they move over and how much power they push, maybe we lean in with the snap here. Maybe we should have snapped a little bit early, knowing that this was a really powerful play. So they drop, interesting. They drop a Sunspot and a Lizard into the Monster Metropolis lane. And so 10 of their power is coming from the Ebony Maw. And we're gonna reduce it by 3 and gain 3 of our own. So it's gonna be a 6 power swing in our favor, even once we drop the Red Skull. So I think we're in a decent spot here. They have a lot of power to make up in Weird World. We do have the Enchantress, or for some reason, if we wanted to, we could do Typhoid Mary. I say we send it. I say we go for it. We know that we don't have a Shang-Chi in our deck. They might, but we don't. And maybe we can draw something from their deck that's less than a set amount of power, less than a decent amount of power. So a Red Skull does turn out to be 18. Ooh, so the Spectrum would buff up these 2 cards, but that is about it. Let's go with the Enchantress. That's going to take away the negative bonus of Red Skull. It's going to give us 4 more power here. It's going to take away 6 power from them because of the Red Skull ability going away. I don't know if it's enough to win, but that's what we're going to try. They do, at the very least, have our Chavez. So they could push that lane up to 30, but then it loses 6, so it would go down to 24? Which I don't know if we... I honestly don't know if we could beat that. No, they push a Mojo in the world. No, in the lane. No way. They're letting their Chavez get absorbed by Dracula. They had a win condition. They had a win condition of Chavez in the far left lane. Not that it would have taken over the power, but it would have accompanied these cards very, very well. So the 9 plus the 4 would have put it 13. This would have put it at 20 and then 25. We got very lucky that they let the Dracula play out as if we were pushing for this lane, and we could have. So I guess it came down to a read, and luckily we got the read correct. That is now 4 wins in a row, all pretty decent cube gains in the process. Let's go ahead and push for a couple more and see how it goes. All right, next up we have Wuyo 1. In our starting hand, we have our Sunspot, which is pretty decent. We are going to be able to do maybe a Lizard, stack that with a lane that we want to Enchantress in the long run. And then Asgard's not bad for us either. I think maybe we do a Lizard into Asgard. We want to try to push for the win here. If we can win Asgard, that lets us draw into our other resources much more consistently, so that we can kind of almost guarantee that we get the upside from like the Typhoid Mary, the Red Skull, and Enchantress, because it's going to come down to winning one of these 2 lanes unless somebody can go wide. And so let's go ahead and keep stacking. We're going to put the cloak into Asgard lane. We're going to lean all the way in. We're going to lean in as much as possible to try to capitalize on Asgard, because we want to draw into our resources and we want to restrict them from drawing into those. And this deck list has a pretty tempo curve that we're able to play into. And so I think we really lean into that, and we get an advantage in games like TVA and Asgard because of it. Okay, and so they go ahead and skip again, which is kind of interesting, but we can play our Nightcrawler and actually move it over into the Sanctum Sanctorum at some point. That way we have power here. We then at least only have to win 1 lane, and they're going to have to win both of the remaining lanes, unless they can, of course, push power wide as well. But I think Nightcrawler is going to help us guarantee we lock down Asgard, and then from there we can have our additional resources. Ooh, and so they do an Omega Red. Interesting Omega Red choice. We have Enchantress, so I'm not too worried about the Omega Red here. I don't think we do Dracula, because we're not planning on dropping a lot of our cards. Unless we ended up doing something like moving our Nightcrawler over into an Enchantress, then we would have 2 extra energy that we could just do an Angela with, which wouldn't be great. That would leave us with some decent cards, actually. I don't think that that's the worst idea. Why not? Why not? We're going to go ahead and play Dracula. We're going to do 0. Once we play, we're going to play Angela first next turn, and then we're going to Enchantress in this lane. That will give us 3 decent targets, a 7, a 9, and a 15 power card for our Dracula to absorb. And so I think overall that's fine. I think that gives us a pretty good win condition. Plus we have the Enchantress to take out their Omega Red, and I think if they're running Omega Red, they're going to stack some ongoing abilities, and we're going to capitalize on that negative downside of them and surprise them a little bit. If they see the 0, they should know that we have Enchantress somewhere in our list. They should. If they do, we don't know. Ooh, we almost messed up. We dropped 0 last so that we could cancel out Angela's ability, not for any other reason than we just had 1 energy and we needed to get 0 out of our hand. We almost played Enchantress first, which would have caused it to be 0'd out, which would have been really, really unfortunate because then it wouldn't cancel out the Omega Red and the Iron Man. And so let's go ahead and drop that in. Now that we ordered it correctly, they do have the greedy onslaught. The worst thing about Omega Red ongoing decks is that it relies so heavily on stacking your power into 1 or 2 lanes, and you just really lean into one pivotal lane. So if they have an Enchantress, you can lose the game in a snap, and then all of a sudden you're losing 4 and 8 cube games that you can't really compete with otherwise. So our Dracula gets the mid roll of getting our Chavez. It didn't really matter because they didn't push any power over there. We win left and right and tie in the middle location. Guys, that is 5-0. Let's see if we can go for the full 7. All right, so next up we have TZ Lemons. And the first location lets us draw into an additional 1-cost card, so that it actually helps thin our deck some. We have 5 cards in hand. They have 5 cards as well, so they were able to draw a 1-cost card. It's something I always like to note is if you see the animation, you know, your hand sizes are equivalent or your deck sizes and it's the first turn, you could figure out if they were able to draw one or if you were, vice versa. And so for the starting hand or turn, let's go ahead and play our Sunspot. We play our Sunspot on the board. They're going to have at least one cost card as well, which is an Iceman. Interesting. Which is good disruption. It causes a lot of curve issues down the line. And overall is a pretty decent play line. Let's go ahead and play our Lizard into Hell's Kitchen. I don't think we need to rush Mojo World unless they have something that ramps up and then locks it down like Professor X. I think we should be okay. We have cheap things like Angela, 0, Nightcrawler, as well as a full hand of Triskelion cards. Unfortunately, not exactly what we want to see. Okay. We can play our Cloak over here. We can play 0 into Mojo World. That's going to allow us to do a Typhoid Mary for free here. And then we just have a lot of cheap cards that we can fill it up with the rest of the way. I think a 10 power push in that lane is going to be... I think it's going to be substantial. I think it's going to be fine, honestly. We could, and they can, move cards over into Hell's Kitchen next turn. But honestly, I don't know that they want to. And I don't know that we want to. We're just going to play our Typhoid Mary for now. We're going to leave the Green Goblin here as is. I don't think we push it over and take that power reduction in Hell's Kitchen. I think we go for a Mojo World, a Mojo World finish, and then Kingpin. Did that start in their deck? No. Kingpin was created by the Triskelion, so they're less likely to have those kind of filler cards that would move our cards around the board as a result. And so I think what we want to do, let's play Dracula. We can go ahead and play Quinjet as well. That is going to reduce this to 0, this to 0. This will be 2 regardless. And so next turn we're going to draw into our Chavez. We'll be able to do something like 1, 2, 3. That's going to give us, or 1, 2, 3. That's going to give us a chance to pull into our Demon, our Chavez, or our Red Skull. So we're going to kind of have it split. It's going to be a split push of where we can push our power on that final turn. And so I kind of like the idea of that play line. They use a Thor to draw into what, like a Wasp? Maybe this deck list that they're running runs a Thor, and they just didn't draw it in time. And so we do have our Chavez. I feel pretty decently about this. We can do the decent power of Iron Fist. We can push our Hood here. We're going to lose this lane anyways, and so we might as well push our Hood there to get it out of our hands. That's going to generate a Demon. We're going to play Nightcrawler into this lane, absorb 4 extra energy into Hell's Kitchen. And then I think we go from there. Do we think they make a big power push into Hell's Kitchen? Because we're going to absorb 4, we're going to push an extra 1. maybe that's enough. I don't know. We might be pushing too heavily into Mojo World, honestly. But it is what it is. Okay, so they don't cap it out, so we're fine there. And I think we're fine in Hell's Kitchen as well. Interesting. Magneto. Ooh, Magneto pulls our Dracula over. Ooh, does that give them the win in Mojo World? Based on, like, the power level? Oof. No, it's just a Wasp. TZ Lemons, that was almost clutch. Had we not pushed as much power as we did, you would have been able to get our Typhoid Mary out of Mojo World as well, swinging this lane and this lane. I'm so glad that we went with the approach to try to get Dracula to draw into the ideal card, because we, in the process, nearly capped out this location, leaving only one space for Magneto to pull over. Okay, and so with that one, we did drop one game in between. There was a double debris Camartage, and it clogged up the board too much. We had bad cards left in our hand. But otherwise, we are 6-1. I think we're going to do one more game to just finish this off with an even 7 win, an odd 7 wins, just to see if maybe we can get another big cube game gain. All right, so we kind of broke our good luck streak just a little bit. We just went up against Exomathius, and they obliterated us with a Thor Lockjaw cycle rotation. They had cloning vats, so they had 2 Thors in their list. It was just awful. It was a beat down. I believe one lane was 45, one was 50. We won one lane, so it wasn't all bad, but it was bad. Oh my gosh! And so I think here we're just gonna skip on turn 1. We're gonna let Sunspot absorb some energy. Exomathis did snap, so they're feeling pretty confident already, which does worry me a bit, but I think it's okay. Let's go ahead and drop our Ebony Maw into this far right lane. I can go ahead and drop our Nightcrawler as well. That's going to let them think that this lane is going to be locked down, but we do have a Cloak that we're going to push so that we can move our Ebony Maw over once we have a little bit more power in the lane. And so Dream Dimension is tough. That makes a turn 4 play rather difficult. Let's lean into trying to cap out the Thor lane. Let's lean into the Cloak now. Next turn, we can move our Nightcrawler out. We can play Dracula. We can move Ebony Maw over. That's going to give us a really big power push in Sakaar, and then we just lean into either a Red Skull or a Typhoid Mary or a Red Skull into a Chavez in the other lanes. And so let's go ahead and move our Nightcrawler out. Next turn, we're not going to be able to do Red Skull, though. We could do Enchantress next turn, or actually, we can do Enchantress this turn, but that doesn't necessarily help us like we would really want, honestly. So I think what we're going to do, we're going to drop our Dracula into the Sakaar lane. We're going to move our Nightcrawler out. Next turn, everything is going to be expensive, which is fine. If they drop a Wong, we can use our Enchantress next turn. There's the Wong. Wong decision. Well, okay, maybe it's not the Wong decision, my friend. They get a double Mjolnir trigger. So if they have an Odin in their list as well, this Thor lane gets pretty nutty pretty quick. But it is what it is. We could do a Typhoid Mary. Do we think they have? Do we think we can have initiative going into the final turn? If so, then we could do Typhoid Mary. We can hit that with an Enchantress. That way, it takes away this ability. It gives us the win condition here. I think it's too risky. We're going to go ahead and play Enchantress into the Dream Dimension lane. That way, we just don't have to worry about it. They do have a double Wolfsbane, which is huge. It's massive. Massive. Oh, no. Okay, and so I think with that, I don't know. What is our win condition? We can play our Chavez here. And if they lean too heavily into like an Odin here, then that'll push power into Sakaar, but not into Titan. We can play here and then hope, I don't know. Let's lock in the Chavez into the far right lane, and let's see how it plays out. Okay, so they play one card in the middle. That's not going to be enough. Our Chavez is going to be enough to take the right lane. Our Dracula will take the Sakaar lane. We get a little bit of comeback after they beat us for a bad 8 cubes. All right, and so with that win, we are going to go ahead and end the video. It just feels nice that we gained back a few of the cubes that we just lost. We lost an 8 cube match. We won a 4 cube match. So overall, Exomathius is still ahead. but it just feels rewarding that we got a few of them back after getting beaten down so badly. And so overall, this deck list runs extremely well against any matchup that I ran into. It has the reach, it has the early game aggro to beat anything that's locking down lanes with Professor X. It has the counterplays that if they have a Shang-Chi, there's enough cards that are under that 9 power that it doesn't necessarily derail your whole strategy. It doesn't rely on any strong ongoing abilities that can be hard countered by an Enchantress. But overall, it just feels like a really flexible deck that can fit into many different scenarios. And so I hope that you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to leave it a like and a comment down below. As always, this has been TLSG. Later, guys.